Coming into a comfortable seated position. If you'd like to sit on a chair, just make sure that the spine is fairly aligned, so not leaning far too back. You can lean back against a wall. Again, just trying to get a sense that the spine is aligned, so the crown of the head is just roughly over the pelvis. We tend to lean forward a lot, and that can start to feel like our natural alignment. So as we draw the spine back into a natural alignment, sometimes it can feel that we're almost leaning back slightly. The most important thing is that you feel comfortable. So taking a moment now just to make sure that you are in an appropriate position for you before we start this journey into a place of stillness. And then from that place of stillness, being able to observe the mind. The mind is a necessary part of our being. The problem is the mind needs extremely strong boundaries to keep it in balance and in alignment with the rest of our being. And we've all been brought up in a society, in a culture that kind of reveres and honors and venerates the mind. And so those boundaries, those necessary boundaries haven't been present, and it's just gone feral. So our journey is to find, cultivate, practice the ability to anchor our awareness into an alternative energy, an alternative frequency. And then from there we can start to observe the mind. We observe it from a place of neutrality rather than engaging in that observation with the ways of the mind. So the mind lives in a world of duality. Something is either this or that, good or bad, up or down, left or right, like, dislike. So we don't want to perpetuate the ways of being when we're starting to observe the mind. And this can take practice because, you know, the whole of our life we've been living in that way. We have a huge identification with the mind. And the mind is driven by the ego, which also needs extremely strong boundaries and hasn't had any. So that's got completely out of control, this enormous sense of self-importance that we all carry because we're so identified to this sense of personality, identity, you know, I, me, and the story of our life that has created that identity. And this isn't about ignoring the story of our life or kind of pushing it away or pretending it hasn't happened. It's about understanding what life is really about. Life is given to us so that we can have experiences, and from those experiences we can learn and we can grow and we can develop. And those experiences are, if we'd been brought up in an aligned way, those experiences would have happened more from a feeling place, and we would have seen them for what they are, you know, great lessons and opportunities for growth and for learning. But because we've identified with these experiences from the mind, we've just attached to them, you know, I, me, this happened to me, I don't like that. And then it puts this sense of ego, this sense of self in the middle of our world. And then from that place of I, me, we can get into judgment, criticism, opinion. You know, we completely project out into our world from that place. And we live in a world where there's so much judgment, because judgment comes from opinion. And an opinion comes from this nature of the mind, this duality of the mind, because I either like it or I don't like it. So our journey is to start to practice just witnessing all of this, not trying to change it, but just witnessing, because the more we can step away from the mind and observe it, the easier it becomes to, you know, step away from the identification that we have with it. So this practice is to help facilitate the journey into an alternative space, if you want to look at it like that, or frequency or vibration. And then from there, we can start to witness the mind. And that's all we do. We just witness this place of neutrality. And it takes practice. It's not like a one kind of session medicine. It's continual medicine that we continue to practice throughout the whole of our life. So if you haven't already, closing the eyes. And one of the biggest tools that can move us into that alternative space is the breath. And closing the eyes. The mind is very external, it's always looking out. And the eyes, as magnificent as they are also always looking out. And they're plugged straight into the brain through the optic nerve. So by closing the eyes, this very, very simple gesture, it starts to invite our awareness into a more internal space, into a more internal perspective. And it also enables us to breathe in a more conscious way. So a way in which that we are aware of the breath. We're not trying to modify or change the breath, especially if you do that, if you have a yoga practice, just trying to observe a natural breath. And at the beginning, this can be quite challenging because as soon as we observe the breath, we kind of get involved a little bit. But the invitation here is to practice moving into a space of observing, of witnessing, not doing, trying, wanting, needing, just observing from this place of neutrality. And this place of neutrality, the mind would call boring, dull, because the mind thrives on drama, on activity. So if and when the mind pops in and why am I doing this, and I'm bored and I need to get on and I need to do this and I need to do that, watching it, not trying to change it, not identifying with it, just watching it from this place of observation that we're going to start to journey into more deeply now. With the breath. So we observe the body breathing in, and the body breathing out. We don't start to get into a dialogue about how we feel our body is today as we're breathing, or the nature or the quality of the breath. We're just observing the body breathing, which it does all the time. So we use something very familiar, very comfortable, to take us into this internal space that might not feel so familiar, and it might not be so comfortable at the beginning, because the mind is very invested in itself. It wants all of our awareness, all of our energy, all of our attention, all of the time. And for the majority of our life, it's had that. So as we start to journey into an alternative space, essentially that is a stepping away from the mind. And the mind is like, hang on a minute, where do you think you're going? And it will just, bombard us with a barrage of thoughts. I imagine them, they're like little, little hooks that come in to try and draw us up into the mind. And because we're so caught in that rut of identification with the mind, we can, before we know it, we're in that mental vibration and thinking about stuff. So learning to observe everything as we're observing the breath now. And essentially we're moving through different vibrations, different frequencies. But it can be helpful sometimes if we do imagine that our awareness is moving away from the head and starting to be guided down into the body with the breath. Our journey is to journey away from the total identification of the mind and to start to reconnect and re-establish a very deep relationship with our intuition, our feeling sense, our internal awareness. And this can be found in the heart space. So if it helps you, you can place your hand on your chest and start to just breathe into your hand, but get in that sense of breathing into the palm of your hand from inside the body. And finding how our energy has just very subtly changed. Things are a little bit quieter, things are a little bit calmer. Yes, perhaps we're aware of that very kind of agitated mental energy of the mind, but we're just observing it. We are choosing to place our awareness, we're choosing to connect into a different frequency. Get a sense here, when the next exhale comes, of really dropping into the heart space. So another pattern that we need to witness is this need for validation. Am I doing it right? Nothing's happening, or I don't know if I'm doing, that dialogue of the mind, because the mind wants proof, it wants validation, it wants to know that it's doing something the right way. We tick that, self-achievement box, or we judge ourselves because we haven't done something the right way. So again, this is linked into the duality of the mind. It's either good or bad, right or wrong. So just trusting, just intuitively trust that your awareness, the conscious energy contained within the breath, is drawing you into your energetic heart space. And there is no need for validation. There's no need for, am I doing it right? Or wanting proof. Yes, you are. Just trusting your very intuitive, innate awareness of your energy system. So allowing these exhales as they come to just drop us deeper into the frequency of the heart. As we witness thoughts, maybe as they come in, as we become aware, there's that constant chatter of the mind. And that's okay. We're just here to observe. We're here to witness. We're not here to change anything, or judge, or label, or criticize. Practicing coming into this space of neutrality. Practicing moving away from the frequency of the mind. Yes, it's there. Yes, we need the mind. But we need to start anchoring these very strong boundaries back into place. to contain the mind. And then once the mind is boundaried, because we've taken this journey into observing and witnessing, and essentially we start to step away from the identification that we have with the mind. And then we come into balance. We're able to live our life more from this place of feeling, reconnecting back into the deep intuition that we all carry. And that's found inside of the heart, excuse me. And we live our life from a more nourishing, supportive, centered place. So spending just a few more minutes here, observing perhaps how the mind is wanting to draw you out. You've got things to do. It's okay, those things can wait for a couple more minutes. We are all addicted to doing. And so this journey is also coming back into balance, into being. And it's always a good reminder, we are human beings. We're not human doings. We are here to cultivate this internal space, this awareness, to not constantly be on the go. From the moment we open our eyes, plugged into the brain, and then completely driven by the brain throughout the whole of our day until we go to bed. It's practice. It's all it is. It's just practice. And it's a lifelong practice. We never get to the end. We never tick the box, reach the goal. Again, that's a pattern of the mind. So we practice coming into balance. We practice anchoring those strong boundaries around the mind, because we need the mind. It is an essential part of our being. It is an amazing aspect of our being. But it's just an aspect. It's not the totality of who we are, which it has become because we're so identified with it. If you've wandered off, got caught up in a thought form, it's okay. It happens all the time. Just come back in, follow the breath down into the heart. Placing your hand on your chest can really help to give that reference. And if your hand has been there, just gently release it. Take a moment to just acknowledge, to give gratitude, honor yourself for taking this time to go on this journey, this movement, this very courageous movement to start to journey away from the mind. And then gently opening the eyes.